Okay, maybe you know why at this point. Maybe you don't. That's none of my business. Anyway, the official pronunciation is Pommet. I don't like it either. I don't agree with it, but that's the right way to say it. So don't yell at me if you're mad. Take it up with the big rat. Now, Pommet is also not a very good Pokemon when Calyrex and Fluttermane are around, but they're on vacation right now. Pommet is one of the fastest fighting types in the format, and even though it doesn't have the highest attack stat, it does have two really powerful moves it can use that both do serious damage: Close Combat and Double Shock. Close Combat hits really hard and then lowers both the user's defenses, but the downside doesn't actually matter that much because Pommet is naturally frail already, and it's holding the Focus Sash item, which means it can always tank one attack. And let's be honest, it's probably not surviving two, even without the Close Combat drops. Double Shock is its signature move. It hits as strong as Close Combat, but causes the user to lose its electric typing after they've done some damage. And Double Shock can only be used if you're an electric type. In other words, you're only supposed to be able to use this move once without switching out. However, if you Terastallize to electric, you can't lose your electric typing, meaning you can spam Double Shock until Pommet inevitably goes down. Pommet gets one of the single most broken moves ever made: Revival Blessing. This move allows you to bring back a fainted team member once per battle, and that is completely and utterly unbalanced. But I'm not going to use it. With neither Toedscruel or Weezing having Protect, I know that Pommet needs to have it, but that means I only have one move left. And while I did have Revival Blessing at first, I realized that on this team, it actually isn't as useful as I thought. Revival Blessing is a really good move when you're already ahead, but it's often not as impactful when you're behind. I also don't have that many high priority targets to revive. If either Toedscruel or Weezing is fainted, reviving them to half HP actually doesn't help that much since Toedscruel can't do much on its own, and Weezing is so frail that starting with half of its HP gone is actually a real liability. Revival Blessing also doesn't do anything until after you've lost a Pokemon. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. It absolutely is one of the strongest moves ever made, but on this team, I think that Pommet has a better option: Fake Out. Fake Out can be really effective when paired with Weezing against an opponent that can't protect. It also allows Pommet to work both in the lead or in the back, whereas before it kind of had to stay in the back to get value out of Revival Blessing. Fake Out is really useful against the Trick Room teams that have been giving me some trouble. Normally, Fake Out is not effective against teams that really focus around Trick Room because they almost always have the Pokemon in DD whose ability Psychic Surge sets the Psychic Drain, which stops all priority moves, therefore blocking Fake Out. But with Weezing around, I can deny Psychic Terrain from ever going up as long as I KO and DD early, and then I can use Fake Out to stall out Trick Room. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that Fake Out is always a little bit useful generally, and then very useful in specific matchups, whereas Revival Blessing oftentimes ends up being not very impactful. Also, I think it's nicer to the Pokemon to not revive them. Imagine you faint 2 times in a single battle, and then other Pokemon would talk about it and be like, oh yeah, they brought, Weezing back and it fainted again, and then yeah, they lost the battle anyway. I don't know, I think that'd be embarrassing. I think it's nicer to let them just faint until the next time. Pommet's ability Natural Cure cures status conditions whenever it switches out, which means that it doesn't have an ability if it doesn't have a status condition. So I don't really care about giving Natural Cure up when Weezing is around. Now, I definitely need a Pokemon capable of threatening Volcarona, as it often runs either Terra Grass or the Safety Goggles item, making it immune to Spore. And it can use the incredibly powerful move Quiver Dance to make itself faster, stronger, and tankier on the special side. After a Quiver Dance, Weezing can't do much damage to it, even with the choice specs, and Pommet often has trouble getting through Volcarona's supporting partners. So clearly, I need some help. Corviknight looks bad on paper because although it is a physical flying type attacker, it's weak to fire. But I realize that if I give it a defensive Terra type of Dragon, Corviknight should be able to hold its own against Volcarona. Corviknight also provides a few more things for the team. It's a defensive Pokemon with incredible typing, capable of walling many Pokemon in the format. It can heal itself with Roost and with the Citrus Berry item, and it can support its teammates with Tailwind. Tailwind doubles the speeds of your team for 4 turns, and with Weezing being slower than most Pokemon in the format naturally, this can suddenly flip that relationship on its head. Tailwind does normally shine on faster Pokemon that are capable of setting it up before other Pokemon move, but on this team it's actually okay to have it be on a slower and tankier Pokemon because a lot of my Pokemon are naturally faster anyway, and so it isn't as big a deal to not get the advantage right away because you really want it for subsequent turns a lot of the time rather than the initial burst. Corviknight's ability Mirror Armor reflects all stat drops back at the Pokemon trying to inflict them, but most stat drops in competitive Pokemon come from the ability Intimidate, and with Weezing's around, those aren't happening anyway. I trained Corviknight to survive Choice Specs Goldango Thunderbolt and make it fast enough to outspeed some of the faster Pokemon in the format in Tailwind. putting the remaining points I have left into its attack stats. While it isn't the strongest Pokemon on its own, it is capable of outputting good, consistent damage if you ignore it for too long, thanks to the high base power of Brave Bird. At this point, my team is starting to look pretty evil, so I decided to add the most evil Pokemon that I know of. Incineroar. Incineroar is the best Pokemon of all time, and the ability shield item prevents Weezing from shutting off the user's ability, and that allows me to intimidate Pokemon that I normally wouldn't be able to, like Kingambit, Dragapult, and Annihilate, as long as Weezing's on the field. Then I add Hydreigon as another way of getting special attacking damage, and the team feels really good. Sometimes it feels really good. Toadscroll and Weezing can win entire games on their own, but also there are some really hard matchups, and not all of my Pokemon feel equally valuable. The clear weakest link is Hydreigon. I almost never bring it. I'm having trouble versus fast fire types like Volcarona and Blaze Poros, as well as Glimmora and Goldengo. So I want a Pokemon faster than all of those Pokemon that can threaten them offensively, that also doesn't care about its ability. Does a Pokemon like that exist? Yeah. Garchomp. Garchomp's ground typing allows it to threaten all of the Pokemon that I'm struggling with, except Volcarona. But as a dragon type, Garchomp also resists Volcarona's fire moves. Normally, I'd want the clear amulet item on Garchomp to prevent its attack stat from being lowered via the Intimidate ability, but with Weezing around, I don't have to worry about that so much. Speaking of abilities, Garchomp's Rough Skin is definitely valuable, but it's not essential. It does a little chip damage to any Pokemon that hits Garchomp with a contact move. While this damage can definitely help, especially against Focus Sash Pokemon like Sneasler or Pokemon that hit multiple times like Mousehold, for the most part I consider it a bonus, so losing it is not the end of the world. Oh yeah, and because I don't need the clear amulet item, I can instead use the Life Orb item to make Garchomp hit much harder. I can boost its damage even further with Terra Ground, boosting the power of both Earthquake and Stomping Tantrum. It might seem weird to have two ground type attacks, but remember that Weezing can't protect itself, so I need a ground move that doesn't hit my partner. And Earthquake is incredibly good when paired with Corviknight, or to finish off an endgame against low HP targets. Dragon Claw is Garchomp's most consistent dragon type move, and it hits really hard with Life Orb. And Protect helps keep Garchomp safe and gives me another tool to stall out my opponent's speed control move. Garchomp improves the team in a massive way, especially because I'm actually bringing it to the battles, but I'm still having some issues. Comet is my fastest Pokemon, and that means that there's a lot of Pokemon that are going to outspeed my entire team. Faster Tailwind setters are especially difficult, like Whimsicott, Talonflame, Rabombi, and Kilowattrel, since they can be paired with a Pokemon that threatens to KO Weezing, and then there's nothing that I can do to stop it. Also, Amoonguss is really tough, because it can put my whole team to sleep, except for Toadscroll, who can't actually do much back. So clearly something has to change, but with Hydreigon gone, who's the remaining weakest link? It's Incineroar. The best Pokemon ever made does not fit on this team. It's too slow, it doesn't hit hard enough, and between Corviknight, Toadscroll, and Weezing, I already have enough support. I don't even like Incineroar, and I'm not even forcing myself to use the strongest Pokemon this year, so why is it on the team? It's gone, and I'm going to replace it with another Fire-type starter Pokemon, Hisuian Typhlosion from Legends Arceus. With a Choice Scarf, it gives me a Pokemon that can outspeed nearly anything else in the format, and with its new Ghost typing, it's immune to Fake Out, which is normally one of the best ways to stop a Choice Scarf Pokemon. Typhlosion also learns the move Eruption, a ridiculously powerful move if the user still has full HP. Normally, the way players stop Eruption is to use Pelipper's Drizzle ability or Whimsicott's Prankster ability to either shut down the damage or take away the speed advantage to let a partner hit Typhlosion before it can move. But with Weezing around, Typhlosion doesn't have to worry about either of those things. It also helps that both Typhlosion's abilities are more or less worthless. Frisk shows the items of the opponent's Pokemon, but in official tournaments, we're told what the items are before the battle, and Typhlosion's other ability, Blaze, only activates when Typhlosion is at low HP. And given how frail Typhlosion is and how weak low HP Eruption is, this ability is mostly worthless. Heatwave allows Typhlosion to have a fire move that hits both opponents and still works at low HP. And Shadow Ball is its strongest Ghost-type move, which you need for Dragapult and Basculegion. But remember, Amoonguss is an issue for my team. And although Typhlosion can threaten Amoonguss offensively, it doesn't help when I need something to come in and take a spore. Does that mean it's not going to work? Well, I do still have one move slot left. So I decide to use the extremely niche move, Sleep Talk. This move does nothing if the user is awake, but will randomly select another move to use if the user is asleep. It's normally used in conjunction with the move Rest, which puts the user to sleep and heals them to full HP, but on Typhlosion, I can use it as a way to mess with Amoonguss. Sleep Talk has a 2/3 chance of getting a fire move and smacking Amoonguss right back, even while it's asleep. And it helps that Amoonguss can't actually threaten Typhlosion once it's put it to sleep. It resists both bug and poison, which are the main types that it would use. And also, it's not really like there's many other moves that I want instead on Typhlosion. Typhlosion's other options include like Overheat or Flamethrower or like Blast Burn, and like, yeah, they do have some uses, but on this team, they're not better than Sleep Talk. Typhlosion also has some really interesting synergy with Toadstool. Toadstool pressures opposing Pokemon to terastallize into the grass type to become immune to Spore, but that then causes them to take super effective damage from Typhlosion. Toadstool can also use Acid Spray the turn before Typhlosion hits the field to double the damage of Eruption, making even fire-resistant Pokemon disappear. The synergy works the other way too. Typhlosion pressures grass types to terastallize to fire or water, which then means Toadstool can spore them. Fun fact about the specific Typhlosion that I brought to the tournament, my girlfriend's first Pokemon game ever was actually Legend Arceus, and she chose Cyndaquil as her starter. So I brought her first ever starter Pokemon to the tournament, which she nicknamed NyQuil. If you want to use this team for yourself, you can do so using the rental code here. Just so you're aware, the team is technically slightly suboptimal. I wanted to use Shiny Toadstool, but the one that I caught had bad attack IVs, but I didn't really care enough to reset. And Typhlosion has a non-perfect attack IV as well because it was my girlfriend's. If you don't know what that means, do not worry about it. It is literally so niche and it didn't come up a single time during the tournament, so it probably doesn't matter. I just feel like I should let people know in case, you know, they, I don't know, check the IVs and they're like, it's not perfect. I know it's not perfect, okay, but it's good enough. Oh, also, if you do want to use the team, I've posted a video on Patreon that's over an hour long that talks about which Pokemon to bring to battles, as well as talks about some of the really niche mechanics that happen sometimes when you use this team. Basically, there are some super specific interactions that almost never come up generally because they involve wheezing and other specific Pokemon, but they're really weird. For example, some abilities activate when a Pokemon switches out, like Amoongus's Regenerator or Palmet's Natural Cure, and these abilities won't activate when Wheezing is on the field. But Palufin's Zero to Hero ability, which also activates when switching out, does work even when neutralizing gas is in play. There are literally dozens of these. I was messaging my friend DeWobblefett for like 2 weeks before the tournament, and every single day I was learning a new mechanic. Huge shout out to DeWobblefett, by the way. Like, he is the #1 Pokemon mechanics expert that I know, and whenever there's something really niche and specific, he's the person who I bother and say, hey, how does this work? For this team specifically, he taught me so many niche mechanics that are present that I otherwise definitely wouldn't have known before the tournament, so I'm really grateful to him. Anyway, yeah, I made this video on Patreon that you can like take a look at if you're curious about the general ones, and for any weird mechanics that happen during the run, of course, I'll explain them here, but if you want to see like more of them, check out the video on Patreon. Anyway, with the team complete, I'm ready for the tournament. I play some games online and definitely roll some people hard enough that a couple other players are taking a look at the team, but overall, I succeed in keeping it mostly under wraps. Mostly. Day before the tournament, my friend Justin texts me. The team he was planning on using for the tournament just isn't working, and he's wondering if he can use my team instead. Justin's a really good friend of mine, so I'm like, sure, why not? I send him the EV spreads, replays, and game plans and help him figure out how to use it with the time that we have left. Now all that's left is the tournament itself. In order to make day 2, I'll need to win 6 of my 8 games today. And to make it into the final top cut bracket, I'll need to win 9 of my first 11 games. Regardless, it doesn't change how this tournament starts, which is that I want to win round number 1. But first, I ask myself a question. Do I really want to release this team into the world? With the right play, it can completely shut out opponents from even getting to play the game. And once the tournament is over, people are inevitably going to try it out. Am I prepared to unleash what's inside Pandora's box and allow the competitive Pokemon players of the world to suffer sleepily? Yes. Yes, I am. But right now, I'm the one who's suffering sleepily because I only got 2 hours of sleep last night, being generous. This feels like Arceus sending divine punishment for my hubris. It's not like I couldn't sleep because I was like especially nervous either. I think this is just the like very dregs of the Hawaii jet lag still kicking my butt. Anyway, I drive into the city, park in a parking garage that is exorbitantly priced because it wouldn't let me back out, and head into the venue to play round 1. My first opponent is using a team that I've seen before. It's a kind of bulky offense team that uses Clefable and Rillaboom to support Volcarona, Kingambit, and Sneasler, all of whom have setup moves. Now, obviously, my primary strategy this tournament is Wheezing and Toadstool, but that doesn't mean I need to use it every single game. In a matchup like this one, Wheezing and Toadstool is a great lead, unless they open with Clefable. Clefable has both Safety Goggles and Follow Me, meaning they can redirect my Spore, which is really bad for Toadstool. They can also lead with Terragrass Volcarona or Rillaboom to get around Spore, or any combination of those 3. The thing about all these anti-Toad-Scroll Pokemon, though, is that they are terribly weak to Typhlosion. So here's the plan. Don't bring Weezing or Toad-Scroll game 1, and then hit them with the mix-up game 2 after trying to bully them out of leading their anti-Spore Pokemon. The battle starts with my Typhlosion and Garchomp against their Rillaboom and Volcarona, the two worst Pokemon on their team against my Typhlosion. I decide to play aggressively and switch Garchomp to Corviknight as they switch Rillaboom to Primarina, and my Eruption critical hits the Volcarona for about 85% of their health as they set up a Quiver Dance. But now I can force the Volcarona to protect and go for Eruption and Terra Dragon Tailwind. And although Primarina KOs Typhlosion, the advantage is mine thanks to the Tailwind that I just set up. I go into Garchomp and pick up a double KO with Dragon Claw and Brave Bird. And now, with just Clefable and Rillaboom left, they don't have enough defense, offense, or speed in order to win. I use my faster Pokemon to close out the game and win game 1. But tournament sets are best 2 out of 3, so I'm not out of the woods yet. Thankfully, I already have a plan for game 2 that factors in how they're most likely to adjust. The game starts with my dynamic duo against their Sneasler and Rillaboom lead. They try to fake out Toad-Scroll while going for a Swords Dance with the Sneasler, but Covert Cloak stops the flinch and allows me to Spore Sneasler, while Weezing Sludge Bomb drops Rillaboom to low HP. I double into the Sneasler the next turn with Earth Power and Sludge Bomb, but it narrowly survives, as Rillaboom U-turn brings in Kingambit. I Spore the Kingambit and finish off Sneasler with Weezing, as both their Pokemon sleep, and my opponent sends out Primarina. They protect, but I ignored it and Earth-powered the Kingambit, who stays asleep for another turn. Next turn, I double Primarina with Spore and Sludge Bomb, and although it survives, Kingambit stays asleep for a third turn. They finally wake up and Sucker Punch to KO Toad-Scroll, but Weezing finishes off Primarina, and I send in my full HP Pommet. I KO the Rillaboom and finally take out the Kingambit, winning me the game without even needing to use my last Pokemon. That's the power of Toad-Scroll. My opponent's Pokemon literally spent more turns asleep than awake in that game. I'm beginning to see why they decided to give this Pokemon an ability that intentionally makes it worse. And also why they've never given a Pokemon this fast Spore before. And okay, if I'm being honest, this is the point in the tournament where I start to maybe question if I'm actually the good guy, since I did just release this team into the world. The second round goes up, and as I sit down and look at my opponent's team, it's the exact same. Okay, the Clefable is Terra Steel instead of Terra Water, and the Volcarona is Terra Dragon instead of Terra Grass, but the Pokemon and the items are all the same. Good news is, I already have a plan. I once again start game 1 off with Typhlosion and Garchomp against their Volcarona and Clefable. Turn 1, Volcarona protects, but I ignore it and launch Eruption and Stomping Tantrum into the Clefable, who goes down. The Sneasler comes out, and they switch Volcarona to Rillaboom in order to activate the Sneasler's Grassy Seed, doubling its speed stat. They wanted to KO Typhlosion before it could move with Throat Chop, but I Terrestrialize to Fire, and Dragon Claw and Eruption KOs Rillaboom and does a good chunk of Sneasler's health. I switch Typhlosion to Pommet, and they try and get the KO with Dire Claw, but instead, Sneasler goes down to Dragon Claw as Volcarona sets up a Quiver Dance. Unfortunately for them, they are way too far behind, and Volcarona cannot win the 1 against 4. I win game 1. Game 2, same plan. Toad-Scroll and Weezing time. Just like my first opponent, they switched to the Sneasler and Rillaboom lead. Now, I realized that even though when I was in this position round 1, I used Sludge Bomb, that actually was a bit of a risk because if Kingambit pushes in, I won't be able to do any damage to it. So I changed my play. I try and Spore the Sneasler, but it blocks it with Protect. And Rillaboom's U-turn brings in Kingambit, and does a good chunk of Toad-Scroll's health in the process. Unfortunately for them, this time I went for Flamethrower, and I dropped the newly switched in Kingambit to low yellow HP. We both reposition, and they get a Swords Dance up with Kingambit, but the combination of a critical hit fake out, Wood Hammer, and +2 Sucker Punch is not enough to KO Weezing, and I knock out the Kingambit. With Kingambit down, I can double into Rillaboom and then Sneasler for KOs with Corviknight and Weezing. And my opponent forfeits as they realize their Primarina has no chance of beating my full HP Pommet. 2 wins, 0 losses. Even though Toad-Scroll was a little bit less oppressive that game, it still did its job of forcing my opponent out of position and creating space for Weezing to do the damage. Spore is the best way of disabling my opponent, but if they're switching and protecting to try and escape the Toad, they're not doing anything to stop Weezing from chipping away at all their Pokemon. Sometimes the threat of being put to sleep has the same outcome as actually putting a Pokemon to sleep. In the third round, I'm paired against a new team, though there are some familiar faces. This team also has Primarina, Volcarona, and Rillaboom, but it also has Goldengo, Tyranitar, and Salamence. Unlike the last two Volcarona, this one has the safety goggles item, making Toedscruel Weezing extremely bad against it. The last two Volcarona teams had the goggles on Clefable instead, but with the item on the Moth, it's completely different. Basically, I shouldn't be relying on Toedscruel here, so let's try a different lead. Palmet and Typhlosion. My idea is that Typhlosion threatens a ton of damage against everything on the opponent's side except for Tyranitar and Primarina, two Pokemon who are weak to Palmet. And since I have the threat of Toedscruel Weezing, I'm expecting my opponent to lead with something that's just not very well equipped to handle Typhlosion. They lead with Volcarona and Choice Specs Terra Steel Goldengo. This is an abysmal matchup against Typhlosion. The Goldengo's only option are to switch or to faint, and if Volcarona attacks, it'll go down to Eruption and Double Shock. So I make a prediction. Goldengo's going to switch out, and Volcarona's going to protect. I decide to use my Terra preemptively, but on Palmet, not Typhlosion. This might seem a little strange because I could always use Terra Electric later to let me use Double Shock again, so using it now might seem preemptive, but there is a reason for this play. Terastallizing into a type that you already have gives you a damage boost. In Palmet's case, it takes my electric moves from being 50% stronger to 100% stronger. However, if I use Double Shock before Terastallizing, Palmet will lose its electric typing and become a pure fighting type. If I then Terastallize into electric, Palmet will be treated as if it were a fighting type that terastallized into electric, rather than a fighting and electric type that terastallized into electric. What this means is that if I use Double Shock and then Terastallize, future Double Shocks are only as strong as regular, non-terastallized Double Shocks. But if I Terastallize before attacking, I get the 100% damage increase on all future Double Shocks. Anyway, this play works. My opponent protects Volcarona and switches Goldengo into Tyranitar, who promptly loses 85% of its health. And this is especially bad because losing this much health on their tanky Pokemon now really leaves my opponent without defensive options. I KO Volcarona the next turn with Eruption and Double Shock, but Flame Body burns Palmet as a parting shot, and Tyranitar KOs Typhlosion. I send out Garchomp, they send out Goldengo. Now, I could, in theory, KO both their Pokemon here if I want to go for an Earthquake, but if their last Pokemon is Salamence, I could get Reversal. They could switch Tyranitar out to reduce the damage from Garchomp with Intimidate, and KO both my Pokemon with Terra Steel Make It Rain. So instead, I decide to play it slow, switching Palmet to Corviknight and protecting with Garchomp. And they go for Protect and Make It Rain. This not only lowers Goldengo's special attack, it also cures Palmet's burn thanks to the natural cure. And now, because they didn't switch in Salamence,